All right. So with Iran threatening more attacks against the U.S. Targets in the Middle East, if the U.S. retaliates, it's worth noting where American troops are in the region. There are between 45 and 65,000 American military personnel now deployed in Saudi Arabia and other Persian Gulf nations, including more than 5,000 troops in Iraq and 600 in Syria. Nearby, roughly 2,000 American troops are based in Turkey.
By the way, look at that map, and you'll note that Iran's borders touch every one of those countries.
And as you can see, roughly 12 to 13,000 troops remain in Afghanistan. Late last week, the Pentagon also directed 4,500 additional U.S. troops to the Middle East, in addition to the roughly 50,000 already there. Roughly 4,000 troops based out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, have started deploying to Kuwait. They are part of the 82nd Airborne Division's Global Response Force, kept on standby for particular emergencies. Let's bring in someone who knows that division well. Democratic Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado served as a paratrooper in Iraq with the 82nd Airborne Division in 2003. The former Army Ranger also served 2 additional tours in Afghanistan. He's a member of the House Committee on Armed Services, and he joins us now. And thank you very much for being on the show, and thank you for your service. With no press secretary, the information is so limited, and you have a letter to the White House demanding information on the Iran strategy. What are you hoping to hear from them, and do you expect to get the answers you're looking for?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mika. So this morning, along with about 35 of my colleagues in the House, we're sending a letter to President Trump, Secretary Esper, and other members of the defense and intelligence community, requesting really important information that not only do we need, but we're constitutionally entitled to. Really, the first thing we want to hear is what measures are being taken to protect our troops. You know, dozens of Iranian missiles struck U.S. bases last night. We are gravely concerned about the status of the security of those forces. You mentioned just a moment ago all of the rapid reaction forces that have been sent to that region. The fact that we've activated most of our immediate rapid reaction forces in our military, 82nd Airborne, 173rd Airborne, elements of the 75th Ranger Regiment and others, tells me we weren't ready for this. Tells me we've had to send all of our emergency forces there. So we need to get our arms around very quickly what the status of our bases are. The second is, what's the long-term plan here? You know, what's the end game? What is he trying to achieve, he being the president? We've spent over $4 trillion in the last 20 years on these wars. Thousands of American soldiers and airmen and sailors and Marines have been killed, tens of thousands wounded. It is time for us to have a national conversation about what we're trying to achieve in this region.
Congressman Crow, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you this morning. You obviously have served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. You earned a Bronze Star, so this is not an academic exercise for you. So I'll ask you, is it good news that General Soleimani is dead and no longer controlling proxy forces throughout that region?
Well, undoubtedly, General Soleimani was a very bad man that did a lot of damage both to the U.S. and to our allies in the region. But, you know, there's a lot of bad people everywhere throughout the world. And there's a reason why we don't go around shooting missiles at all of the bad people, because there are consequences when we do that. So prior administrations, you know, they weighed the benefits versus the risks of killing General Soleimani and other people like him. They've determined that the risks of doing so outweighed the benefits. This administration made a different determination. We have not yet received the classified briefing about why they made that determination. We hope to get that information today. But, you know, we always have to look at the big picture here. You know, General Soleimani spent the last 2 decades trying to do one thing: drive U.S. forces from Iraq. Because Iran knows that if they drive U.S. forces from Iraq, that they can be the unchecked hegemonic power in the region. So if through his death, you know, public sentiment and will in Iraq has turned against the U.S. and we are expelled from Iraq, they actually end up achieving their goals. And Iran can be unchecked in the region, and Israel and all of our other partners in Iraq are in far worse position than they were just a week ago. So that is the risk of all of this. We're seeing some of that happening, and that's why why we need to get our arms around what is the overall strategy here.
So, Congressman, what do you read into Iran's response? Ballistic missiles fired last night into two air bases, American air bases inside Iraq. It looks, for now, we're still waiting for the sunlight and the damage assessments to come officially from the Pentagon. We're hearing no American casualties, no Iraqi casualties. Again, that's for now. What do you read into the way that Iran responded to our killing of General Soleimani?
Well, a lot of what Iran does, they do through their own domestic political lens. So much of this has to do with how the hardline regime in Iran needs to consolidate their own power. We gave them actually a big gift last week by providing this external enemy, this foil that the hardline regime needed to consolidate their power, to get the public will and sentiment on their side in Iran. And unfortunately, we're seeing that happening as tens of thousands of people turn out in support of the regime in Tehran and other places. The other thing is, it's too early to really tell exactly what happened with the missile strike, but the fact that some of these missiles hit so far off mark, early indications report, some of them hitting in fields outside of the bases. These are actually very accurate ballistic missiles. And if Iran wanted to hit directly where they wanted to in some of these bases, they probably had the capability of doing that. So it is possible that they shot these missiles off in a very public display of retaliation, but did so in a manner that they were trying to avoid major damage to the U.S. forces, which tells me there might be an opportunity right now for a tactical pause, for both sides to take a step back, to say, let's reevaluate this, let's come to the table and figure out a better way to resolve this crisis.
Congressman Crow, this is David Ignatius. I just want to ask you a basic question. What do you think is the appropriate posture now is for Democrats as they look at this crisis? What are the kinds of things you'd like to hear from your Democratic colleagues?
Yeah, well, first off, we need to protect our troops. That is priority number one. We have to make sure that the men and women who we represent, the sons and daughters of America, are being protected, that we're getting the resources and the personnel in place to make sure that if there are additional attacks, that we're protecting people. That's priority number one. Number two, we need to engage with our allies. We have continued to tarnish ourselves with our NATO allies. They weren't aware of this attack. And the problem is not just our obligation to keep them in the fold, but we actually put them in danger too. They're with Iraq. They're fighting alongside us. They're at our bases, and by doing this without them knowing about it, we put them at risk. So we need to bring them back in the fold and show our allies that we're going to be a steadfast, reliable partner. And then third is we need to be very clear about diplomatic efforts. I served in the military. Our military can do an awful lot, but I also realized the inherent limitations of military power, that at some point military power ends and diplomacy and engagement has to begin. And we're at a point where we have to use all of the tools in our toolbox: diplomacy, economic sanctions, our moral authority, our military power. We have to bring all of those to bear in a very smart way to achieve our goals.
Congressman, you obviously fought in Iraq and understand the region well, better than most. There will continue to be a debate over whether Donald Trump made the right decision this past week in the killing of General Soleimani. I'm curious, though, knowing what you know about Iraq when you were there and now, are U.S. soldiers safer with General Soleimani taken off the battlefield because of last week's strike?
I don't have the information yet to make that decision. I have been very clear that Congress needs to be engaged in the process. We're going to receive a classified briefing later today. We've asked for the intelligence that led to that attack. We want to know, why did they think that was imminent? That's what I need to see. That's what Congress should have seen days ago. Hopefully we get that information today. Looking at it from my perspective now.
But Congressman, you do have the information that General Soleimani was responsible for the death of hundreds of U.S. soldiers in Iraq. So my question's not really to the purposes of the attack or whether Donald Trump should have actually launched that strike against General Soleimani. The question is, are U.S. troops in the region safer today because General Soleimani was taken off the battlefield?
Yeah, staying here today, I don't think so. He is undoubtedly a bad man, but you have to look at the bigger picture here. You have to look at the fact that this security and our strategic and tactical goals have to do with a lot of things. They have to do with the status of our relationship with our allies and partners, the security situation in Baghdad, our engagement with the Baghdad government, our engagement with all the other allies in the region. There's a reason why two prior administrations, Democrat and Republican, decided that the risks were too high, that the results of the killing of General Soleimani would be worse than the benefits of killing General Soleimani. And that was a very, I think, wise decision. So standing here right now, we have missiles raining down on American air bases. We're sending, almost 7,000 rapid reaction forces to the region. The response actually indicates whether or not we're safer. And the fact that we're having to send all of our rapid reaction forces to the region throughout the world tells me that we're in a very dangerous position right now.
Indeed, we are. Final question. Some Democrats over the past 4 or 5 days have had a hard time answering the question of who General Soleimani was. Did you consider him to be a terrorist? The United States government considered his organization to be a terrorist organization. Did you consider General Soleimani to be a terrorist?
I disagreed with the administration's determination that the Revolutionary Guard Corps should have been designated a terrorist organization. I disagreed, obviously, with their means. I thought that they wreaked a lot of havoc, but there is a very dangerous precedent that's set in designating foreign state government military units as terrorists because, I could have told you that they were going to do what they did. They turned around and they designated the U.S. military terrorist organization too, and that sets off a cascading effect where then everybody does that. The rules get set aside, and people can do whatever they want to do. So again, there's a reason why we've exercised restraint and have not done these things in the past, and we're seeing that this has set off a cascading effect that's going to be very hard to control right now. It's time for the tactical pause, for every side to step back and say, how can we resolve this without going to war?
So you don't consider General? I completely understand everything you said. Just to get an answer though, so you did not consider General Soleimani to be a quote terrorist?
General Soleimani was the general and actual government official of the Republic of Iran. That's very different from al-Baghdadi, Osama bin Laden. It's one of the things that makes this killing unprecedented. This was not a stateless individual who was roaming around the region, attacking anybody and everybody. This was a high-ranking foreign government official that was killed in the capital of one of our partners and allies. A very different situation here.
So that answer is no.
Yeah, I think that designating both the Quds Force and the Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, and of course all the members of those organizations as terrorists, I think that was a very misplaced move.
All right, Congressman, thank you so much. Very enlightening conversation.
Jason
we greatly appreciate you being here, and all of us thank you for your service to America.
Absolutely.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.